And I told you last time when I was here, we're talking about how do you find God's calling in your life, and I gave you started to give you some questions, and here you go, Sales. I'm not going to be talking about this today, but I just want to make sure we have these. So. About 10 years of my life, I was involved in helping people sort their way and making decisions as to next steps in their life. I did the consulting in a corporate context where I worked with executives, executive teams, and these are some of the kinds of questions I would ask to help you kind of sort, what am I doing next? Where am I investing my life? And maybe those things will be helpful to you. I meant to put my email address in there too. If you ever have questions or you want to sit and talk sometime about what's going on in your own life, where you might be headed, I offer myself to you. Business paid me $1,000 a day for doing it, but I'll do it for a cup of coffee. And I'll even buy it. But I take great pleasure in being a help to people and certainly have a desire to honor the Lord with your life. I want to help do that. Well, this morning we're going to be looking at the life of Peter. Peter, is one of the 12 disciples that Jesus selected, who followed him for 3.5 years. Most of the disciples, after the crucifixion of Jesus and his resurrection, returned back to their former life of fishermen. And Peter was one of those men. And after spending 3.5 years with Jesus, after observing him dying on the cross, after him seeing that his tomb was empty, and then watching him ascend to heaven, and all this context, Jesus had many things yet to say to them in that, and he said a lot of these things to Peter. We'll look at some of those today. The last time that he was with his disciples here on earth, they watched him ascend into heaven, and prior to that, Jesus had met with them up in the Sea of Galilee. Are you familiar with the land of Israel? Well, got a little feel for it? If you can imagine I'm going to let you use your imagination. Imagine this long kind of rectangle here. This would be the space. It's only like 75 miles across, maybe 60 miles across from the Mediterranean Ocean here to the Jordan border. And from the top up here, what they call today the Golden Heights, it's only 30 miles from Damascus, the capital of Syria, is the top of Israel. And then at the bottom, you have the Gulf of Aqaba, you have Egypt at the bottom, and the south section, almost a third of the whole country is desert, it's the Sinai. And then you have a mountain range that goes right up the middle of the mountain. And so, in the middle of the mountain, in the mountains is the capital, the city of Jerusalem. The capital is on the Mediterranean, Tel Aviv. But if you go 75 miles north of Jerusalem, there's a lake, a large lake there. It's called Galilee. And above Galilee, there's a mountain up there, Mount Hermon. And we're going to be talking about some of that today in that region. The imagination, you stay with me? You got an idea? What's really cool in my mind is that we are sitting here in Southern California at about the same latitude on our globe as the country of Israel. And I saw the similarities. If you can imagine that rectangle I just described up here and lay it over the state of California. And at the top of it would be Santa Barbara, and the bottom of it would be
San Diego.
the what?
San Diego.
San Diego. I was thinking more east, probably the top of Baja California. So just that slice of land. You've got the San Bernardino Mountains here. That'd be like the mountains that Jerusalem was located in. And we have the Salton Sea. They have the Dead Sea. Galilee would be at about the same location as up by Bakersfield. There's a Lake Isabella. That would be, kind of, and we have the coastal plain, like where we live here in the LA area, that would be in the Mediterranean Pacific for us. But anyway, it's very similar in the terrain and climate of Israel. And so Jesus, after his resurrection, the disciples went back to their fishing in Galilee, and Jesus met them at Galilee, and that's where we're going to start today. It's a conversation that Jesus had with Peter there at the Lake of Galilee. And in this conversation, Jesus asked Peter a question. Peter, do you love me? And Peter responded, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. But what I just said to you was one common English word, love. You love me, Peter? Yes, Jesus, you know I love you. But in Greek, in the language that was written in here for us in the New Testament, those are two different words. Are you familiar with that? Okay, there's two different words. There are three different words that are translated love in English that are different in the Greek language. And one is agape, and that is a love that is a sacrificial love. It's the love that's it's the word that was used in John 3:16. For God so loved the world, He so agape the world, that He sent His only begotten Son. It's a sacrificial love. It's a spiritual love. It's a deep inner spiritual commitment love, agape. And it was that word that Jesus used when He asked Peter, do you love me? Do you agape me? And another word for love is the word that Peter responded with, phileo. And phileo is a Greek word that means a friendship love. It's not a deep, sacrificial, committed love, but it's a friendship love. It's like I could say, I hardly know you here, but I've been here enough that I feel some affinity with you. I feel some commonness with you. I feel a phileo love with you. It's the word we have a city in the United States called Philadelphia. Phila, love, Delphia, it's a brotherly love. So Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. Delphia, phileo. So, did that get too confusing for you? It's really significant in this conversation that we're going to read today. But those are two different Greek words, and they're used in this conversation, and in English it's translated love in both places. So what we have here is in the text, John 21. I think you have it in your bulletin there too, if you want to. I'll follow from that one. So here we go. So when they had finished breakfast, they're on the shore of Galilee, and they fix breakfast, build a fire and fix breakfast there, and the guys are out fishing. What happened here? Peter and Andrew were fishing on one boat, and James and John were fishing on another boat, and Jesus showed up on the shore, and Peter looked and he says, it's the Lord, it's Jesus. And Peter jumped out of the boat and swam ashore. He didn't wait to get there. And so you know he was pretty excited about seeing him. So anyway, they're on the shore, they finished breakfast, and says, so when they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Do you agape me more than these? And what are these? It's not clear in the context to me, at least. These could be, do you love me more than fishing? Because that's your livelihood, you know. You left, when I was resurrected from the dead and I showed up and stuff, you all went back to Galilee to fishing. It's like, why did you do this? But I have work for you to do, but that's what they did. So it could be, do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than your career? Do you love me more than the things that you regard important in your life now? Do you love me more than the family, your brothers that are here? I'm not sure what these are. But I could say this, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than anything? Do you agape me in a sacrificial love? Do you love me more than anything? And Peter said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. I love you as a friend. You see the difference? Jesus said, do you love me with a committed heart? And Peter said, yeah, I like you. And so then it said, then Jesus said to him, tend my lambs, take care of my lambs. And then he said a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you agape me? And he said to him, Peter said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I regard you as a friend. I love you like a friend. And Jesus said to him, shepherd my sheep. And then Jesus said to Peter a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And this time he changed his word. The first two times he says, do you agape me? Do you love me with a sacrificial love? And this time he used the same word that Peter had been using to respond. Do you even like me as a friend? See in the dialogue how Jesus came down to his heart and said, do you even like me as a friend, Peter? You can't love me with a sacrificial love, I see. But do you love me as a friend? And it says here, Peter was grieved because Jesus said to him a third time, do you love me as a friend? And Jesus said to him, or Peter said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. I love you as a friend. And Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. Take care of my sheep. Now, it's not that Jesus had a flock of sheep, lambs that he wants to take care of. He was talking about people. He says, I have work for you to do in my kingdom. I want you to take care of the fellow believers around you. I want you to shepherd them and take care of them. But it's curious to me that here is Jesus calling Peter to a love to him that is a sacrificial love, and Peter can't get it. But in spite of that, Jesus calls on him to be one who leads in his church, one who takes care of those who are believers, who are sheep, who are lambs. That gives me some room. That helps me. There are times in my life when I fail miserably in terms of my attention, my interest, my response to God, and the things that I know that he wants me to do. He's fully aware of what's in my heart and my life. And he still loves me, and he still says, come, I have work for you to do. I think when he says that, I think he also says, will you please just grow up? You know, will you settle in your heart who you're going to serve in this life? Are you serve yourself, or are you going to serve me? And Jesus keeps calling us. He doesn't give up, and he did give up on Peter. And we'll see that'll be really significant before we get down here. So, we have down here the line says, tend my sheep. And then in verse 18 it says, truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, Peter, you used to gird yourself, dress yourself, and walk wherever you wished. But it's going to be different when you get older. And we'll read the rest of that toward the end of our time. as a closing to our thoughts today. But so you get this conversation that was going on between Jesus and Peter. And what I see out of this is that the condition of our heart and our love for Jesus is a priority to him. I think it's important to God that we grow in our understanding of him, that we grow in our acknowledging him, and that we grow in our sense of dependence and welcoming him in our life, and that we grow in our heart commitment to him. Last week, Carl and I spent a couple days in San Diego. We were celebrating something. It was our anniversary. And when I first met Carla, I thought, I like Peter, I really phileo you. I really like you. Yeah, she was a hot babe. No. I told you, I think I may have told you this before. I've been around the church for about 6 months or so, but there was a church picnic in the summer, and there were 2 softball teams going, and Carla played softball. And she was on the other team, and she got up to bat, and she hit a home run. And she really got my attention. I said, ooh, what a baby. That's why. But, so, we got acquainted, and we spent time together. We were in the same junior high. She was a cheerleader, and I led the pep band. And so we traveled with the teams. We were together in a lot of different situations. But our relationship was one of a lot of like. We like each other. But there was a point in time in our relationship where I felt drawn to Carla and hoped that she felt the same way toward me. And when I asked if she would consider spending the rest of her life with me, she said yes, and I was pretty excited about that. But that was 54 years ago. And I'm going, you know, it's like normally when we have anniversaries and things, you send cards and greetings, or you exchange thoughts and stuff. And most of the time, I feel like what I really ought to do is send Carla a sympathy card. That she has endured me all of these years. But, she'll give me a bad time about that in the card that I said that. But she's tolerated a lot with me. But at the same time, I'm thinking, how much does God love us so much, committed to us so much, and we come up short, and yet he still pursues us and still loves us. And he wants our heart. And that's what this whole conversation was with Peter. You love me. I have work for you to do. Do you love me? I'm not about what you do for me. I'm not about the work you do. I just want to know that you love me. And if you love me, I have work for you to do. But if you don't love me, it's going to be empty. And so, God has expressed numerous times throughout his word the importance and the condition of our heart. I referenced this last week in terms of God's calling in our life, and there was a time when Samuel, who was the priest, prophet, and God called on him to anoint a new king to replace Saul. And he went to the family of Jesse, and Jesse had a lot of sons, and many of them looked really highly qualified. But God said something to Samuel in the selection of a king that would replace Saul. And he said this to Samuel. He says, God sees not as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. What's in your heart? So as you look for a king, look for one, look at his heart, not his stature or his appearance. So God looks at the heart. And then King David, before he died, said to his son Solomon, who was going to be anointed as king. And David said to Solomon, says, "As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father. Know the God I've been following. Know the God I've been honoring. Know the God for whom I serve as king of Israel. Solomon, get to know the God of your father and serve this God with a whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands every intent of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will let you find him." That's in 1 Chronicles 28. I gave these references in your notes, so you can look all these up again. I encourage you to do that. Find a moment and instead of reading the comics, read that. You may find some of it humorous as you go. I do hide things in there that you'll never know. I won't say them, but they'll be there in your notes. So, but you just understand that God is after our heart. Solomon, then, in writing of the wisdom that God had given to him in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, says this: "Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life." Stay in touch with your heart. Guard the integrity of your heart. Say what's real. Live what's real. So, I said there are some lessons that we're going to gain from Peter, and this is the first lesson we gain from the text we just read, and that is that God wants your whole heart. He doesn't want your half heart. He doesn't want you just Sunday morning. He wants your whole heart. And when you give him your whole heart, all I can tell you, out of almost 60 years of walking faith, the more you give your heart to the Lord, the more satisfied, the more fulfilled you are, the more productive your life is, the more influential your life is. Good things come out of your life the more you give your heart to the Lord. Serve him with a whole heart. Well, the text that we started with here, it's in your bulletin, and it says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, Peter, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But it will be different from here out." So what I want to do is go back and look at a few settings in the life of Peter that are recorded in the Scripture. And Peter's first encounter with Jesus came through his brother Andrew. And in John chapter 1:40, that was the opening scripture you read today, one of the two men who were following John the Baptist, one of the two who heard John the Baptist speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Andrew first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is the Christ. "We have found the Christ. He's come. He's already here. We found him." And so Andrew brought Peter to Jesus. And Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which is Peter. Now there's some things in these words that will be meaningful to you as we look a little further into Peter's life. And I want to say to this, Jesus will bring life changes to the one who follows him. And those changes will be good. You'll be more settled about who you are. You'll feel good about who you are, because you'll begin to recognize that God created you the way you are for a purpose, a meaningful purpose. And as you walk with him and live in a relationship with him, you'll begin to experience the significance of what he's made you. But in this conversation here about Jesus changed the name of Simon. His name, given name, was Simeon. That would be the Hebrew word for the man we're going to end up calling Peter. But his Hebrew name was Simeon, but because he lived in a culture that spoke Greek, primarily in the marketplace, they changed Simeon to Simon. And so here's Jesus addressing Simon. And he gives him a new name. He calls him Cephas. There were three languages predominantly around in Israel at the time of Jesus. There was the Greek language, which was the marketplace language, and there was Hebrew, which had been with them for millennia. And then there was Aramaic, which was a dialogue of the area. And so the name that Jesus gave to Simon, Cephas, is an Aramaic name. And the word Cephas means rock, stone, boulder. And the Greek equivalent to Cephas is Petros. And Petros in English is Peter. That's how we get the names when we come down. But what is significant about this is here's Jesus meeting Simon for the first time, and says, Simon, from now on you're going to be known as the Rock. And I'm going to guess Peter, from what we read about his life, was pretty excited about that because he was a husky guy. He was strong. He was pretty self-confident. He had one disease he carried with him all the time, foot and mouth disease. He was always putting his foot in his mouth and saying the wrong things at the wrong time. But here was Peter, who Jesus says, from now on, I'm going to call you the Rock. You're solid stuff. But he wasn't. What's interesting, though, is that Jesus saw him for what he would become, just like he sees us. From an impulsive, boisterous fisherman, Jesus was going to make Peter an integral part in laying the foundation of his church. So the second lesson I walk away with is that Jesus has a predetermined plan for Peter and for us. I want to encourage you that you don't need to seek, look after, try to find, put a lot of energy in trying to discover what that predetermined plan is. What I want to encourage you to do is pursue the Lord with your whole heart. And with the motivations that are good in your life, do those things. As you have opportunity to do good things and serve, as you have opportunity to grow in your understanding and your skill in the thing, do those things and you will find yourself on the predetermined plan that God has for you. It's not a mystery. But you'll find it as you live in a relationship with Him, as you love Him with all your heart. I thought about saying the second lesson here is that following Jesus can be a name changer. Peter chose to follow it and got his name changed. Simon got his name changed to Peter, the Rock. Well, Peter's second encounter with Jesus, after having been introduced through Andrew, we find in Matthew chapter 4. Now, as Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea. They were fishing there in Galilee. And Jesus said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And immediately they left their nets and followed him. There are two other gospel accounts that describe the story. I wanted to take time with that, but I'm not going to with you this morning. But you have the picture here that Jesus encountered them again. He met them. The first encounter with Jesus, when Andrew introduced his brother to Jesus, was in the south along the Jordan River where they were baptizing. So this is 60 miles or so north, back up the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus encounters them again there where they're fishing. And he says, follow me, I'm going to make you fishers of men, not fish. And they left their nets and followed him. It's a little more descriptive in other places, but the third lesson is, I learned from this about Peter, is that following Jesus will be a game changer. Not only might it change your name, how you're identified, how you see yourself, but it could be a game changer in the sense of where you're headed with your life. What's your life direction? Following Jesus can bring changes to it. Do these men change from fishing for fish to fishing for net? Then following Jesus, Peter had a front row seat to the miracles and teaching of Jesus. In Luke chapter 5, verse 3, Jesus was teaching, and there was a large crowd that was there, and he was on the shore of Galilee, a large lake. It's almost a sea, they call it, the Sea of Galilee, because it's such a huge lake, miles across. But Jesus was crowded right up to the shore with all these people around him, and there were two boats there, and one of them was Simon's boat. And so Jesus stood in the boat and said, "Push me out." And so he went out into the water in the boat. They couldn't come in, so he had some room to speak to him. And so he was out there speaking from the boat to the crowd that was there. And then we read here in verse 3 in Luke 5, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, they're in the boat there together, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Let's go fishing." I'm done preaching. Let's go fishing. And Simon answered and said, "Master, we worked hard all night and caught nothing. We've been fishing all night." We came back and with nothing. We worked hard all night and caught nothing. But I will do as you say and let down the nets. So Peter said, "Okay, if that's what you want to do, we'll go fishing again." When they had done this, they enclosed a large quantity of fish, and their nets began to break. They had been fishing all night and caught nothing. And Jesus said, "Let's go fishing." And they went to a spot and let down their nets, and then they put the nets down, and then they pull a ropes on the edge, and it closes in around, and they catch fish in the enclosure of all that net and pull them back out. So there were so many fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat, that's James and John, and they came in their boat out for them to come and help them. And when they came and filled both of the boats so that they began to sink, both boats were full of fish. And they'd been fishing all night and got nothing. But when Simon Peter saw that, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." I'm in the presence of thee who can pull off something like this. I don't belong in your presence. I am not worthy to be here. I'm in awe at what you have just done. For amazement had seized him and all his companions because of the catch of fish which they had taken. And the fourth lesson I find here from the life of Peter is this: when you are done failing on your own, do what Jesus tells you. When life feels futile, when you don't know what you're doing, you don't feel like you're worth anything, everything you touch doesn't work. From the example of this fishing experience, fishing all night and got nothing. And Jesus said, "I know where the fish are." He didn't say that, but he said, "Just go fish again, and I'll give you an abundance." And it has to do, again, with the principle: do you love the Lord with all your heart? Are you willing to depend on Him for the things in your life? You can walk through the futility of life on your own, or you can choose to walk in an awareness of God and a submission to Him and following Him and have a productive life. So when you're done failing in your own strength, in your own wisdom, in your own choices, do what He's called you to do. Practice with what He's giving you. What's in your heart to do? What's the motivations in your life? What are the gifts in your life? The skills, the abilities, the aptitude? What kind of opportunities has God opened up to you? Do those things and you will find a net full of fish in this story. A year later, after this experience at Sea of Galilee, a full year later, Jesus chose his 12 disciples. I had always gotten some of the impression he chose his disciples right up front. Well, he hadn't. It was a full 12 months later, after these experiences we've just been reading about, that Jesus identified the 12 that were his disciples, his chosen. And in Matthew chapter 10, verse 2, that he begins the list. And what's interesting is how it reads. The list says this: the first of the disciples. The first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, and he continues to list them all. But in the list that Matthew writes, Peter is listed as the first. That's the title that's given to Simon, who is called Peter, the first. First among the disciples. That was quite an honor to Peter. The rock. A year later, after calling the disciples, naming them, well, a whole year later, this is now the beginning of the third year of his ministry. 3 years, 3.5 years that Jesus ministered. The beginning of the third year, a year later, Jesus told the disciples to take the boat that they had and take it on across Galilee, because he was continuing to talk with people and it was getting late. He says, guys, just go ahead and get in the boat and go on. I'll catch you later. Well, a storm came up out in the Sea of Galilee, which can be very rough out there, as these guys are in the boat. And lo and behold, in this storm and the boat moving all over the place in the winds, they see an image walking toward them on the water, and it's Jesus walking on the water during the storm. And he's walking toward them in the boat. And this is the context there in Matthew chapter 14. Peter said to him, as Jesus is walking on the water, Peter said to him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. I think he probably thought, hey, that was really cool. I might say something like this if he was water skiing. Can I join you on a ski? But walking on water, that's another story. But Peter thought that would, if Jesus can, let me come too. So Jesus said, come. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind and the waves, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, you of little faith, why did you doubt? You believed you could when you stepped out of the boat and walked toward me. Why did you see the storm and the winds and the waves and all and become frightened by that? Why did you doubt? Why didn't you continue to believe? And when they got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those who were in the boat worshipped him, Jesus, saying, you are certainly God's Son. They were amazed again at his healing. But there's a life experience in this, the fifth lesson I have come out of with Peter, and that is keep your eyes on Jesus and not on your troubles. Not on the obstacles around you, not on the difficulties of life. Don't focus on what can happen. Don't focus on how bad things are, but keep your eyes on Jesus. This is a storm. The boat's tossing all over the place. And Jesus is walking on the water. Jesus, can I be with you? Come. But don't put your eyes on all the troubles, the struggles and things that are in your life. Put your eyes on, keep your eyes on Jesus. And He'll walk you through the difficulties you come across in life. A day after, a short time after this encounter on the boat, it was a day after calling people to a deep commitment to God. Jesus had been preaching all day, calling them to trust in God, and it's recorded in John chapter 6. The whole chapter there is the first time he really strongly encountered those about their faith and trust, and where they were putting that faith and trust. And at the end of that day, many people who had been following him left because the commitment was too much for them. They're not interested anymore. We were interested in the miracles. We were interested in the healing. We were interested in the food that you created out of nothing, or that you created out of little. But they weren't interested in the commitment, trusting God with all their heart. You love me. And many left. So Jesus said to the 12, this is in John 6:67, you do not want me to go away. You don't want to go away also, do you? He's turning to his disciples, 12. Are you going to leave me too? Like everybody else? And Simon Peter said to him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. Why would we leave you? Why would we want to leave you? Well, that was an expression of faith and trust in the one who had little faith walking on the water. But here's now an expression of trust in who Jesus is. And that confession even increases in a very short time after this comment that he made. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 13, it says, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, Caesarea Philippi, remember my map that was here? You have the mountain range in Jerusalem here, you have Galilee. North of Galilee is Mount Hermon, and at the base of Mount Hermon is a city that Herod's son built, and it's called Caesarea Philippi. Okay, it was written for Caesar, for Philip, the city that was built there. And so anyway, there's a whole bunch more of that. Well, I'm going to tell you that there at the base of Mount Hermon, in this community, Caesarea Philippi, there on the base of the mountain, there's a huge cave. And it's there. Carla and I were there almost 20 years ago now. But it makes it so, the whole story so vivid that cave is a very deep cave, goes down into the earth a long ways. Was known by the locals that were there as the mouth of hell. It was the opening to the inner earth, into the places of hell. And that's how they referred to this large cave. And it was there, as you'll see in a minute, the statement that Jesus had to make. But they're there in Caesarea Philippi. And Jesus was asking his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Who do they say? Because that was a name that was given to Jesus. He was the Son of Man. Who do people say that I am? And they said, some say John the Baptist. You're really just John the Baptist, back to life. And others, Elijah, the prophet Elijah has come back. And still others, you're Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. And Jesus said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter answered, again, the lead spokesman of the group, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, Peter said. He professed faith, trust in who Jesus is. Jesus said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, Simon, the Greek name Simeon. Bar Jonah, Bar is son of, and Jonah, son of Jonah, John. Okay, so that's what that's about. Because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, Peter. You didn't learn that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, by what you've seen, observed, because man convinced you of that. Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven revealed to you the truth of who I am. This is spiritual insight given to you by God. And then Jesus said, I also say to you that you are Peter, the rock. And upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, or hell, will not overpower it. There is a religious system in our world today that teaches from this passage that Peter himself, that God built his church on Peter. And he became known that he was the Papa of the church, the Pope. You know the religious system. And that's a complete misunderstanding of the context that is here. He said to Peter, I say to you that are Peter, that upon this rock, and what is this rock? Not Peter. He could have said, but upon you. He didn't say that. He said, upon this rock. And what is the rock that he's going to build his church? It's the profession of his faith that Jesus is the Son of God. That Jesus will build his church on that profession. And he said, so on the profession of Peter, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. The significance of that statement at that point, at that place, in Caesarea Philippi, the cave, the pit to hell, the door opening to hell, and that's what he was saying. And he's at that location when he makes his statement. I'm going to build my church on a testimony of who I am. And hell, that hole in the walk in the mountain, will not prevail against the church as it pursues. Well, in Matthew 16:21, from that time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. Suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, all the Jewish religious leaders, and that he would be killed and raised up on the third day. It says Peter, the one who professed, Peter took him aside, Jesus aside, and began to rebuke him. God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you. No one's going to mistreat you. Nobody's going to kill you. That's just not going to happen, Jesus. That was Peter's posture. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. I don't know if I'd like to be called Satan. But he said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. For you are not setting your mind on God's interest, but on man's. And I'm sure Peter didn't get it because of what happened in his life that follows. But Jesus was just simply saying to Peter, what you're thinking about is who I am and what I can do for you and for people around, and because you're one of my chosen here, that builds your reputation and you're something that's here. And he says, you're only thinking like a man. God's interest is that he sent me because he loves the world with a sacrificial love. And he sent me to offer my life as a sacrifice. I am going to die. They are going to kill me. But that's God's design for me and for you. So you're setting your mind on God, on man's interest and not God's. And right after that statement, he set a standard for what it means to be a follower of Jesus. In Matthew 16:24, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself. Take up his cross, die. In Luke it says, die daily. And follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Here's Peter. He says, there's no way they're going to kill you. Well, yeah, they are. And by the way, I'd like you to just hang yourself up on the cross every day. I want you to live in the freedom of knowing that you have eternal life. I want you to live in the freedom that God is in you and working in you and empowering you and is there providing for you. I want you to trust me. So the sixth lesson I have in this is let the old man die. And by the old man, I mean the old man you were born with. The person that you live in this body that is corrupt. And a mind that is self-oriented, seeks its own satisfaction, doesn't care about anybody else, hurts everybody around them. He said, let that old man die. Let that selfish guy die. And let Christ live in you. Die and just follow Jesus. That was the sixth lesson. It is there. I'm going to read just some text coming through you now, just in some of Peter, and then it'll make some sense, more sense to you. 6 days after this conversation there at Caesarea Philippi, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, 3 guys. He took them and led them up on a high mountain. That was Mount Hermon, which is right behind Caesarea Philippi. It's like, I don't know, 10,000 some feet elevation. It's about the same height as Mount Paul. So they took them a few days, but they got up to the top of that. And they went up on a high mountain Hermon by themselves. And he, Jesus, was transfigured before them. His countenance changed. His face shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I'll make 3 tabernacles. I'll build temples here. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. I don't want to leave this place. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell down on the ground and were terrified. And Jesus came to them and touched them, saying, Get up and do not be afraid. And lifting up their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus. I don't know what that kind of experience would do for you. I don't do drugs. Where in the world did this vision come from? Just to have an experience of seeing, hearing, and saying, there's something more to life than flesh and blood. There is a spiritual dynamic in this life that's alive. Now this could be really strange to you right now, but according to Scripture, God is present in all of us who have professed faith that Jesus, when he died on the cross, died for you, died for us. All who have come to that kind of settlement in their own heart and life, they believe that Jesus is in fact the Son of God. And he came for one purpose, to pay the penalty I deserved. He died in my place, satisfying the justice of God, the law of God. And having died in my place, has the right to say, I forgive you, and I receive you. There's a spiritual dynamic that happens. God, the creator of the universe, Jesus, the instrument of all creation, according to Colossians chapter 1 and John chapter 1. Jesus lives in you who have professed faith in him. I don't know I can't wrap my arms around that one. But the statement is, having professed faith in Jesus, God creator, Jesus the Son, his Spirit is present in me in front of you right now. I don't know, you look at me and you say, I just see Ed. He's the guy on the tail end of life. He's willing to come and spend some time with us and talk about God's Word. He's just a guy. And I am just a guy, but I'm not just a guy. According to the Scriptures, God of the universe is present in me and in you who have professed faith in Christ. Walking on water is nothing. I come and I share these things. I share them out of a personal conviction that what I say I've experienced in my own life and find the validity. God says that when we trust him and love him with our whole heart, he does remarkable things through us. And he's ready to do that in each of you as well. And maybe already is. And you say, yeah, I got it, Ed. I understand what you're saying. But if you don't, pay attention. If you seek him, God will let you find him. Come with a whole heart. Another situation came up. This was in the last days. It was in the last night that Jesus was with his disciples. It was the night before he was arrested, that same night. Earlier in that evening, the disciples were gathered. They had a meal together, and Jesus got up from the meal. It's recorded in John 13. And Jesus took a basin of water and he started washing the feet of the disciples. Now, that's something only a servant would do. You know, a master, a teacher, someone of a high respect or reputation would never wash somebody's feet. The servant does that, a lowly person. And Jesus took a basin of water and started washing the feet of the disciples. And coming to Simon Peter, Peter said, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered, what I do, you do not realize now, but you will understand hereafter. I'm doing something that doesn't make sense to you, but you'll understand later. Peter said to him, never shall you wash my feet. You're my master, you're my Lord, you're my teacher. That's beneath you to wash my feet. Never shall you wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, then you have no part with me. And Peter's response was, Lord, then not only wash my feet, but also my hands and head. Lord, if washing my feet has to do with my identity with you, then give me a bath. I'm trying to just get a sense of the heart of Peter. And he kept moving from one to another, and you're going to see this coming up in what happens. In Luke, recorded there in that same room in this conversation, Jesus had this conversation with Peter. He called him Simon in this case. He said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. And you, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. I just want you to know, Satan has demanded that I give you over to him. Now, Jesus didn't have to give anything over to Satan. But he just said, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. Like God, like Satan came to God and wanted to create havoc in the life of Job in the Old Testament. Same kind of context. But Jesus said, I have prayed for you, Peter, that your faith will not fail. And when you have turned again, I want you to strengthen your brothers around you. But he said to him, Lord, with you I am ready to go both to prison and to death. And Jesus said, I say to you, Peter, the rooster, the chicken, will not crow today until you've denied 3 times that you know me. And here's boisterous Peter, confident as can be, I'll never separate myself from you. If it even means dying with you, I'm going to die with you. And then Jesus says, Peter, Satan's going to sift you. You're going through some tough times. And I want you to know that tonight you're going to deny 3 times that you know me. Well, in Matthew chapter 26, it says this, on the way to the Mount of Olives, which is, it's near the Temple Mount. It's near where the temple is located. It's probably about a 2-mile walk from where they were gathered in the upper room. And they walk down to the Mount of Olives, and there's like a garden setting. It's called the Garden of Gethsemane, but it's olive trees, and it's still there. You can walk to that location today. I doubt that they're the same trees that were there 2,000 years ago, but they're the seedlings of. But anyway, they walked to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus said, you, speaking to all the disciples, will fall away because of me this night. What's going to happen tonight, you're all going to leave me. For it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered in the Old Testament. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee, and I'll meet you there. But Peter said to him, again, even though all may fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Jesus, just a few minutes before, in the upper room, told Peter that he was going to deny him. But he is here again. Others may fall away, but I will never fall away. And Jesus said to him, truly I say to you that this very night, before a rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And repeated it for him. And Peter said to him, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same thing too. So the 7th lesson in this is walk in humility. Remember, pride comes before the fall. Matthew 26. When Jesus came to Gethsemane, he took with him Peter, James, and John, saying, my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me. He went a little further, a little beyond them, and fell on his face and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Now you say, what is this cup that's going to pass? Well, the cup was the cup of bitterness that he knew he was going to drink the next day as he dies on the cross. He knew the cross was ahead of him the next day. And here's Jesus in his humanity saying, Father, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to the cross. I don't want to drink this bitter cup. Nevertheless, not my will, your will be done. And that was a place of choice. And Jesus had that in front of him in his humanity. You and I have those choices in our life. Am I going to choose to do what God called me to do? Or am I going to do what my flesh wants? But Jesus said, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. And he came back to the disciples, and they were sleeping. He asked them to pray and watch through this difficult time for him. And his disciples fell asleep, and he said to Peter, so, you men could not watch with me for just 1 hour? At the most critical point in time of my life, I'm going to die tomorrow, and you can't spend an hour with me in prayer? You fall asleep? Keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation. He said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is indeed weak. Now that's my 8th lesson out of Peter's life. He said, he's certainly willing to never deny, but the flesh is weak. There are a lot of things you may want to do, but recognize the weakness of your flesh. Let it die and just follow Jesus. Get out and walk on the water and keep your eyes on him. There are lessons in the life of Peter that we can live by. In Luke chapter 22, it says this: having arrested Jesus, they led him away and brought him to the house of the high priest. But Peter was following at a distance. And after they kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard for the house of the high priest, and had sat down together, Peter was sitting among them. And it's my short abbreviation here is that 3 different people, one a little girl, another a woman, and then a man, all identified Peter as a follower of Jesus. And that put him in a threatened position that he could be arrested just like Jesus. The 3 people identified Peter as a follower of Jesus, and Peter denied knowing Jesus. While he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. It was dawn. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. They were in the same presence. 3rd time, Peter said, "I never knew that man." And he turned, and there was Jesus standing there, and their eyes met. The Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the Lord had told him, "Before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out, Peter went out and wept bitterly at what he had done. Told twice that was going to happen. But when threatened, gave in. Wanted to protect his child. Well, 2 days later, on the 3rd day, and this happened to be on the 1st day of the week, which is Sunday, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb, and while it was still dark, she saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. So she ran and came to Simon Peter and John, and said to them, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Peter and John ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, John saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Simon Peter entered the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings and the faith cloth which had been on his head, the head of Jesus, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. He was not there. He was not taken bodily away. The wrappings were still present there in the tomb. Jesus had died on that cross that Friday morning, laid in the tomb all day Saturday, Sunday morning, 3rd day. They went to the tomb and he was not there. He was risen from the dead. And they gathered again in Galilee, and Jesus met them. And that's where we started with the questions that that Jesus made to Peter. Do you love me? I have work for you to do in my church. And the 9th lesson I come away with in the life of Peter, in spite of his inconsistency, in spite of his boisterousness, in spite of the fact that he was the first to acknowledge, Jesus is the Son of God, the Christ. All of the positive things out of his heart and life, and all the crippling things of his life, doubt and fear, sinking in the water when he was walking on water. I didn't mention it here, but there in the garden we have a record too that Peter had a sword with him in the Garden of Gethsemane when they came to arrest Jesus. Peter took out the sword and swung it at the servant of the high priest and cut his ear off. There in the Gospels, we read the story, and Jesus took and touched his ear and healed it. But all the things in Peter's life, and even coming down to the bottom line, saying, I don't even know him, out of fear for his own life. In spite of all those things, the 9th lesson for me is Jesus is gracious, merciful, forgiving, affirming, and empowering. He believes in you. You don't have to prove yourself to him. He already knows what you're made of. You can't prove yourself to him. Just trust him. Give him your life. Live it for him. Love him with a sacrificial love. Love him with a whole heart. Pursue him with all that you are. Peter made this statement in his letter that he wrote, 1 Peter, the first letter, in chapter 1, verse 13. Therefore, prepare your minds for action, keep sober in spirit, fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you as the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance. But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves in all your behavior. If you address as Father the one who impartially judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves in fear or respect during the time of your stay on earth, knowing that you were not redeemed with perishable things like silver or gold from your futile way of life inherited from your forefathers, but you were redeemed with the precious blood, as of a lamb unblemished and spotless, the blood of Christ. Back in Galilee, having called to Peter to, where's your love? Do you love me? Jesus said, truly, truly, I say to you, Peter, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go. Now this he said, signifying what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. And that did indeed happen. 68 AD, almost 40 years later. Peter was a prisoner in Rome, taken out the hill under the Nero, the emperor of Rome at the time. And Peter was crucified. Tradition says that he pled that he not be crucified as his Savior was, but that he would be crucified upside down. And that's the tradition is that we don't have that's a biblical story. Peter was crucified by the Romans, hanging upside down. Peter followed Jesus, died crucified, lived a life that established the church that continues for 2,000 years since those days. Peter the rock. Not because he was a rock, but because in Christ he was a rock. And that's true for all.